This is Immortal Works Flash Fiction Friday, episode 83. 99 by James Wymore. Read by Zach Bjorge. Ashley looked down at the stack of papers she had to finish grading before she could finally go home. She paused to rub her shoe. The ibuprofen took the edge off, but since a forklift ran over her toes, she'd been in various levels of pain. Why did she even come into work today? She pushed a lock of black hair behind one ear, took a deep breath, and promised herself she'd rush through grading this assignment so she could start teaching tomorrow with a clean desk. She drew a smiley face on Holly's paragraph describing her family's holiday traditions, admiring the neatly colored picture of a young girl wearing a black robe and blue scarf from her favorite book. Setting it aside, she looked at Beth's next. Her picture featured two bunnies with little capes and masks. The words described making costumes for their pets. Another big smiley face. The next page made her gasp. Jason's paper was mangled with chunks of red wax mashed into it. Had he chewed up the crayon and spit it onto the page? It looked like he stomped them in so they wouldn't fall off. Ashley rolled her eyes as she tried to piece together meaning from the terrible handwriting. We put blood in balloons and pap it on people who knock at our door. What? She looked at the amoebic shapes drawn before the spit-stomp phase of the art. Were they supposed to be the red playground balls the kids used at recess except popped? She hoped the next sentence would shed more light on the cryptic essay. I am bring unto you today. She rubbed her temples. If it hadn't been Halloween and the administration hadn't been so adamant that every teacher be here to help keep order, she would have called a sub. Maybe she would leave the grading until tomorrow. Or whenever. If her foot still hurt tomorrow, she'd take another sick day. A quiet knock and high-pitched giggle came through her door. Probably a student. She tipped her head to the side. Who is it? Miss Latunsky, it's me, Jason. I brought you something. She tucked his paper under some others. She didn't want to critique it in person to him. He could be unpredictable. Come in. A young teen with short dark hair and mixed bloodline skin came in. He didn't make eye contact, but clearly bubbled with enthusiasm. He reminded her of a floppy-eared puppy, which occasionally bit. This is for you. She took the red envelope out of his hand. It had been what she could only assume was her name written on the front. Thank you, she said automatically, modeling good social skills. What is it? Invitation to my house. He smiled, looked up, then looked down. She tore open one side, preferring not to run her finger over the glue strip he probably licked, and pulled out a small card with his address written on it. Are you having a party tonight? She couldn't really read the rest of the words. No. She scrunched her face. This is really nice, but I already have Halloween plans. Reading a book in the bath after taking strong painkillers definitely counted as plans. Not all night, just to see. I decorated for trick-and-treaters. His wide eyes spoke volumes about how much he'd put into this. I can stop by on the way home, I guess, she smiled. It wasn't far from the school. I'm getting ready to leave soon. Can I come see it now? Now? His brows knit. He shook his head. Almost ready. Just a few minutes, okay? Okay. He turned and ran out of the room, huffing all the way down the hall and out of the school. She shook her head and picked up the assignments again. I guess I'll finish these after all. Ashley parked her sedan in front of a brick bungalow with more bare patches than grass. Dark clouds obscured the sun and threatened rain, bringing twilight early. She'd looked the address up before leaving, still unable to read his writing. The place looked deserted. Jason's excitement seemed to imply decorations, but unlike the nearby houses with jack-o'-lanterns and cut-out skeletons, she couldn't see any holiday trimmings. She carefully got out, being sure not to put any pressure on her excruciating foot. The doorbell gave an electric whine and then choked. One sec! Jason's unbroken voice called from deep inside. Ashley put one hand out to lean on a metal pole and take pressure off her foot, but immediately pulled it back. A gritty rust coated her fingers and palm. She wanted to wipe it off, but her other hand held her small purse, and she didn't know how to get hand sanitizer or a tissue out without spreading the mess before Jason yanked the door open with a creak. "Hi," she said. "Are your parents here?" Jason looked to the side. "In the back. I'll take you." He squinted mischievously. Ashley paused, but he just kept holding the door, so she finally went in. She'd never met his parents, they didn't come to conferences, so this would be a chance to learn more about Jason's unique home environment. After she walked in, he closed the door with a rattle. As her eyes adjusted to dim interior lighting, he ran into the next room and closed that door, leaving her alone. "Jason, I can't stay long. What's going on?" The only light came from cracks around plywood panels covering what used to be front and side windows. The room was empty except for a single wooden chair and what looked like a large red teardrop hanging from the ceiling. She turned to get a better look at the door her student had disappeared behind, but a wide crevice between two of the cracked floorboards forced her to catch herself, putting pressure on the broken toes and bringing an involuntary yelp. She covered her mouth, not wanting to offend her hosts. After a moment, the pain subsided, and she carefully made her way to the other door. No knob. No features of any kind. It rested tight in the frame. Had they forgotten her? Jason must have left her behind without thinking. She put her hand on the door to push it open. Grit reminded her that the hand had rust all over it. She stepped back. From the state of the house, she wasn't sure anybody would even notice a brown handprint, but she didn't want to make a bad impression. With her untainted hand, she set her purse on the seat of the chair and began rifling through until she found a tissue. The empty hand sanitizer wouldn't help. After she wiped her hand off, she went to the door and gently erased the print. Once she finished, she wadded the paper up and held it as she pushed on the door. Nothing. She leaned hard against each side, but it wouldn't budge. Locked? She couldn't imagine why, but between the pain and the weird situation, she'd had enough. "Sorry, but it's locked. Listen, I really need to get going. I have somewhere else to be." She'd already canceled her original Halloween plans. She just wanted to go home and relax. "I'll see you in class, okay?" Nobody answered. Ashley rolled her eyes and hobbled back to pick up her purse. She tucked the soiled paper into it and paused to look at the big red bulb stretching down from the ceiling. It was too high to reach. The top bunched together and went through a hole in the ceiling. As she looked closer, the side had a squiggle drawn on it. 99. She realized it was a large balloon filled with something heavy that caused it to sag unnaturally. Was this the thing Jason had been so excited to show her? It seemed to be about on par for a kid who would stomp chewed crayon pieces into a page as his art. Realization finally pushed through the vague pain, and she knew this was what he'd drawn. She really didn't care anymore. Grabbing her purse, she headed for the front door, twisted the knob, and pushed. Nothing happened again. There was a keyhole where the deadbolt turned, but there wasn't a key. "I'm locked in?" Suddenly, any pretense of wanting to help this kid evaporated. She pounded on the door, but it wouldn't give. She summoned her firmest teacher voice. "Jason, get in here right now! You're going to be in big trouble if you don't open this door!" No answer. She march shuffled over to the other door and pounded on it. "Mr. and Mrs. King? Hello? Can anybody hear me?" Silence. Exhausted and confused, Ashley went back to the chair and sat down. She crossed her sore foot over the other knee. It throbbed with her heartbeat, which raced. Despite believing she'd taken all the medication she'd brought with her to work, she rummaged through the handbag again, looking for any overlooked pills. She didn't have any water, but right now she'd happily dry swallow anything that would cut the spikes. "Hey! Let me out!" Obviously, this was the thing Jason wanted her to see. She didn't mind haunted houses or escape rooms, but this was entirely inappropriate. "Jason! Anybody! I'm not joking. I hurt my foot and I need to tend to it. Something dark caught her attention. She leaned over and picked it up. It was a shredded piece of red rubber. When she stretched it, she could see marks. Further stretching revealed the number 98. He had done this 98 times before? The balloon carcass felt slimy, so she tossed it. She looked at her hands and shrieked. Her fingers had dark liquid smeared over the tips where she'd handled it. In the dim room, it looked black. She lifted it closer and saw a reddish hue. It smelled like metal. Blood? This couldn't really be blood, could it? Her eyes snapped up to the ball suspended above her. She jumped out of the chair, ignoring her foot. Breathing heavily, she stared at the rubber, stretched nearly to the breaking point, with what she could only assume was blood. Where would they get so much blood? Was it human blood? Her rational mind tried to explain it away. It was probably fake, red dye and syrup. But it didn't smell fake. A deep fear began to well up inside her, blocking out all other thoughts. Was that the blood of the last person they'd brought here? Were her fingers stained with the blood of the person before that? How many people had they killed here? The answer was staring at her on the side of the elongated sack. 99. She wasn't about to become number 100. She pulled the rusty tissue out of her purse with shaking hands and wiped what she could see off her fingers. She didn't care about rust anymore. Staring at the balloon, she noticed something even darker at the bottom. She stepped forward, holding her breath. The darker color was actually a line and several dots. They had a familiar shape. She stepped up on the chair with her good foot, hoping to get a better look without rupturing the membrane. A key. She lowered down carefully, avoiding the tender toes. Everything fell into place. All she had to do was get the key and unlock the door. She hated this place. She hated these people. For the first time in her career, she hated one of her students. Real hate. Enough to suppress the first instinct to have him transferred out of her class because she wanted to spend the rest of the year making him pay for this. She took a few deep breaths and held her purse tight to her chest. All she had to do was get the key, preferably without getting drenched in blood. Maybe if she threw something sharp? She opened the purse and removed nail clippers, extending a small fold-out file. There had to be almost a gallon of blood in that thing. She couldn't imagine anywhere in this room that wouldn't be splattered when it exploded. Then a new plan bloomed. She remembered if you cut a small hole into a balloon, the air would just leak out. Should work for one filled with liquid too, right? She closed her eyes tight, gathering her courage. She forced back phantom thoughts of being murdered and her blood harvested for the next balloon. She just needed the key. If anybody came in here, she'd use the chair as a weapon, even if it was a psychotic young teen. She stood on the chair again, reaching up with both hands. She gently pinched a small ridge of the rubber between two fingers. Her shaking hand made it hard to get the nail clippers over the loose fold. I'm just going to cut a small hole and wait for it to drain. She took a deep breath. Snip. Pop! Thick, cool liquid fell onto her fingers, her arms, her face, her hair. It drenched her shirt and pants, filling her shoes. She tasted it. For a long time, she just stood there, wishing for death. Then she carefully rubbed her eyes so she could open them and slowly stepped down. She found the key on the floor and unlocked the door. She went outside, wishing it was raining. She got in the car and drove home. Thanks for listening to Immortal Works Flash Fiction Friday. For more about this author, visit his website, jameswymore.wordpress.com. If you have a flash fiction story you want us to read on this podcast, you can submit it to us on our website at immortal-works.com. And please rate, like, and share our podcast. It really helps us grow our audience. And if we get enough likes, we'll tell the police where we hid the bodies. Maybe. I love that he's using Holly's name, and then your name.
And Ashley's name.
Yeah, it gets better, by the way.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it gets better.
He called Jason a floppy-eared puppy. That's what he jokes about calling me all the time.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets better. That's the part I liked. He uses your full name.
Bastard.
Yeah, right? It's pretty great. If her foot still If her foot still hurt... Oh my gosh. If her foot still hurt tomorrow, she would take another sick day. With her untainted hand, she set her... I've got one of those. Sorry.
What?
I have an untainted hand, and then I have a tainted hand. You don't want to know.
I don't need to know.
No.
I can guess.